Well, Gene, I do appreciate so much you taking the time to sit down and have this conversation with me. Like I told you when I came in, of the 8 other people that I've already interviewed, a majority of them at some point just mentioned how much they enjoy your stories, and have just, when I ask them of people in the community who they look up to, your name comes up frequently. So I'm honored, and I thank you so much for having me in your home and doing this interview. So thank you.
Well, I'm honored that all these people are loving my stories. Then it's so much more fun to tell them when people are loving them.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, to jump right in, that's kind of what I wanted to hear from you is, so you obviously are very gifted at storytelling, and you obviously work very hard at it. And I know that the times I've heard you tell, I'm just always impressed, and I love to hear you tell stories. And so I would love to hear, at what point in your life, if there is a story specifically that you can remember where something clicked and you realized that storytelling was something that you wanted to do. When was that for you?
Well, I thought we were going back further than that.
Well, I
So,
would love to hear further than that. So,
so when I was a little girl, my mom's father, who we all called Din Din, was a classic grandfather telling stories, but he made up the most glorious stories about when he was a little tough onion. And that has always stuck in my mind about being a little tough onion. Doesn't mean you don't have to be a feeling person too, but it means that you can bring your stuff to the table and be there and get it done. And he told stories about when he used to make soapbox derbies, and he would drive them up a telephone pole and along the telephone wires, and it was a magical journey, and I loved it. And then in the summers, I used to go to my Aunt Lovey's house in Bardwell, Kentucky, which is a town that has 1 mile in diameter, but it's also a county seat. My older sister and I would go there and spend a big chunk of the summer there. My Aunt Lovey worked in the courthouse as the superintendent of schools, and we could walk from her house safely through the town down to the courthouse whenever we wanted to. And when we got there, we could slide down the banisters or play in the courtroom or run around the tax room. Or we could go, and if the sheriff wasn't busy, we would sit in there and he would tell us stories.
wow.
And I loved that. When I got in elementary school, we moved to Auburn, Alabama, and my mom became the librarian at the public library, who was responsible for the children's books and the story hour. And so she always brought home great children's books. And I have always adored great children's books. Life wasn't simple in our house, and everything wasn't cool, but when it was bedtime, she would hold court sitting on the couch, and we would sit in a circle around her, and she would read to us the best stories from all the best children's books. And, you know, I don't even remember which ones I loved best except for Winnie the Pooh, but when I became a mom, one of the things I loved best was pulling back out children's books and finding new ones. And there were new ones that were great when I became a mom. I really love William Steig and Dr. DeSoto and The Amazing Bone and Gorky Rises. He's my very favorite. So all of these books have heart, humor, and a little magic. And that is what I really love in a great storyteller that's beyond what I am at this point in my life. But it was great. And so when my son was small, there were some storytelling events around. And the person that I looked up and found and ran into the most was Betty Ann Wiley. If you don't know Betty Ann Wiley or you missed her story years, I'm sorry for you, because she was fabulous. She did great children's stories when she was telling children's stories, and she had adult storytelling things on too. One time I went to the Carter Center, and her very best story is a spoonerism of Gone with the Wind. Gone with the Wind, all about Harlot O'Scara and Butt Retler. It was just hilarious. And she could, I mean, that story must be 20 minutes long.
Wow.
And it is a complete telling of all the important things with all the spoonerisms with it.
Wow.
Just great. Betty Ann Wiley was one of the founders of the Southern Order of Storytellers, which we used to call SOS, for Southern Order of Storytellers. And we didn't know anything about Moth back then, but that was a lot of people who were doing this storytelling were related to libraries, were told children's stories in libraries, and I don't know where else they did it, but Betty Ann kind of instigated a lot of storytelling going on. There were other people, but I didn't know them as much. And I loved hearing Betty Ann Wiley. When I started going to the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Atlanta, their building was the place that the Southern Order of Storytellers had their annual storytelling festival. And they would have workshops, and they would have featured tellers. Usually there was just one featured teller. So I went and took some of those little workshops. It was just for fun. I didn't think there was anything in particular I was going to do with it except just have fun. I liked listening to stories. What could I learn about telling stories? You know, my son was grown by then, but who knows what would happen with it. It was fun being in the little workshops. They were, you know, just anywhere from 1 to 3 hours. They weren't mega workshops, but they were great.
I bet.
And the first person who was the featured teller when I went to that was Carmen Deedy. If you've never heard Carmen Deedy, you have missed something. I fell off my chair laughing during her telling. So she told personal stories, and she was great. She was really great. I loved it. And the featured tellers would tell a story that was over an hour long.
Wow.
She lives here in Decatur. And she occasionally is at other events that I've gone to through the years. And she has a sister who tells too.
Wow.
Now I still only knew whispers about Moth in the background. I only knew Southern Order of Storytellers since I had learned about them there. There was a woman another year who came over from Birmingham, Dolores Hydock, and she is an actress as well as a storyteller. And she did a fantastic production and had live musicians who were the ones who had played for the Ken Burns series. So I've gone over to Birmingham to see her in other productions. She's fantastic. And so I just mainly touched base with storytelling that once a year for a few years. And I'm not sure exactly when I started thinking that I'd like to go to more storytelling festivals. And there are storytelling festivals of every level, but all of them have somebody really good on the lineup, and some of them have only really good on the lineup. Jonesboro, Tennessee is the most famous of the big festivals. But when I talked to people who went to it, it felt too big to me. It's like they have big tents, and you have to go into a tent that has 500 people in it and find your seat and get your seat, and then you have to choose between one of several tents. So you have to choose which storyteller you're going to listen to. And that felt more challenging than I wanted. And people who have been going to that festival for so long have reserved all the rooms that are in town, so you have to do a little bit of a commute. But the people that I got to know in storytelling would tell me about other festivals that were around. And so one year I decided, instead of going on any other vacation, I was just going to multiple festivals and listen to whoever was there. And I think the first festival I went to was in Athens, Alabama. Fantastic festival. Wow. And it had tellers who told personal stories, and it had tellers who made up stories, and it had tellers who told Native American stories, and it had a variety of stories. Kevin Kling, who you may have heard on NPR at some time or another, was at it, and he tells the most fantastic stories. He is a person that if you just looked at him, you might think he was disabled, but he is more able than almost anybody you can imagine, and tells just fantastic stories. Well, what I found is at the Athens Storytelling Festival, at the St. Simon's Island Storytelling Festival, at the Georgia Mountain Storytelling Festival, at the Isaiah Storytelling Festival, which is in LaGrange, Georgia. At all of these, and at the Big Fibbers Festival that was in Rome, Georgia, at all of them, the people who put them together curated them. And so they picked through the ones that were just okay. And they always had somewhere between 2 and 5 of the best tellers. Wow. And that was when I really got introduced to Donald Davis, who tells personal stories all the time, and Andy Offutt Irwin, who tells made-up stories all the time. They are both supreme. Both supreme. Andy would be the featured teller at the Big Fibbers Festival. I went to one of his little workshops during that, and he told us how he put together the story about his Aunt Marguerite. He says, I'm from Covington, Georgia, and almost everybody in Covington knows me. And I know most everybody there because many of them are my relatives. And his Aunt Marguerite is 80 years old, and she just graduated from medical school because she was tired of the garden club and playing bridge.
Wow.
And she has a daughter named Francine in Boston who doesn't eat meat and doesn't wear leather. And Marguerite was driving down the road, and one of those old busted up school buses that had been made into a watermelon truck had them fall off the back of the truck, and bust. She went over and she took her cell phone and took a picture of it. And then she sent it to Francine. She said, Francine, you'd love being back here in the South because even the roadkill is vegetarian. That is his story. I don't know if I have permission to tell it, but he told it to us during our workshop.
Wow.
And I will never forget it. So my dream is one day to be able to make those kind of stories. But as it turned out, I found out that Donald Davis had storytelling workshops, real workshops, week-long workshops. And so for my 70th birthday, I gave myself a trip to Ocracoke Island, where he lives and teaches one of his workshops. It was a long drive, and then it was a long ferry ride to get over there. It was a lovely week. And people just sat around telling their stories, no pressure, no. Some of us, after we'd practiced telling stories to each other and worked on them, some of us told at some little local venue, no big deal. You know, we'd already told to all these people and we'd heard theirs. And one thing in that part of the storytelling community, and I think it's true in most of the storytelling community that I have come around, is unlike some writing workshops I'd taken before, you do not criticize people's stories. You listen to their stories and you give them approval for what you did like about their story, if you're going to give them any feedback at all. And they can figure out if they want to drop something from it or not. You could say something like, that sounds like 2 stories. I'd like that to be part of another story. But you wouldn't say, that's an awful story. You would say, this is what I like about that story. Or you would keep your mouth shut and wait 5 minutes till the next person was telling. And that's kind of a rule of the game in the storytelling community.
Yeah.
And I think it encourages us who used to be shy. I used to be shy. But it encourages you to get up and share what it is you have to share. And so we spent a whole week like that. Unfortunately, I didn't get out and drive around enough on the way to that workshop, and I had a pulmonary embolism.
Oh, no. No.
And so I didn't miss any of the workshop, but I missed the telling at the end of it because I had to go to the emergency room.
Oh, my goodness.
And that's when I discovered that Donald Davis teaches these workshops in LaGrange, Georgia, only a short distance away, every summer also. It's not quite as exotic or beautiful, but LaGrange is a nice little town, and I went for 7 years to different one-week workshops with Donald.
Wow. Wow. Well, I mean, Jean, it is to hear all of that. I'm not surprised now to hear that part of your journey, and again to see what I see from what I know of you, just hearing you tell your stories. I mean, I would say that you made the comment that you hope to one day be at that level, and I would say I don't know those storytellers well, but I would say I feel like you're at that level, and I love your stories, and you are definitely just one of the most polished, and every time I hear you, it is just a wonderful story. So I love hearing that story of how you got here, and again, it makes so much sense. So that's thank you for sharing that. Do you remember? Is there a specific memory of the first time you ever got up in front of a crowd, whether it was at one of these workshops or somewhere else, but do you have a memory of the very first time you ever got up and told a story in front of people and what that was like?
Well, what I will say is these things that I did within the workshops were kind of gentler experiences and not as big a crowd. I did come back to Atlanta and start telling some at Manuel's Tavern at Carapace.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know if you are familiar with Carapace, but it is drawing it out of the hat thing. But it's still just kind of a cluster, a smaller group, and you already know some of the people, and they're sitting around having beers, and it also feels like low stress. And so I am surprised. I mean, I've been teaching yoga and Tai Chi for a long time, so getting up in front of a small group of an appreciative audience is not a stressful thing.
Yeah.
So, and all of these things so far up to this point were not the Moth.
Yeah.
But I kept hearing about the Moth, and when I first heard about the Moth, I didn't like the idea because they judge you on it. Until one of my people from my class who had been going to Carapace also, and who invited me to go with her to the Moth. And what I found was that at the Moth, even though you were judged, it didn't feel like you were judged harshly.
Yeah.
And it felt like if you didn't win, it didn't feel like you lose.
Right.
Which is the thing that, so I only started going to the Moth in January of last year.
Wow.
24. And that was the most, well, let me put that two ways. Let me say one more thing about the preparation for it. Ever since COVID, I've been Zooming with other storytellers and working on honing my stories. And I think they wouldn't be as good as they are if I didn't have that practice with other people. But I had worked on the story that I had for that night. I had worked very hard on it. I had written it and rewritten it and practiced it with neighbors and practiced it with my Zoom group. I had really, really worked it, and I knew it was a good story. I knew it was a good story. And when my name got drawn out of the hat that I could tell it, I was shaking all the way down to the stage. I was shaking in my feet so much I thought I might fall down. My voice was fine. There was a glare of light in my eyes, but I could see people, and they were responding so well to the story that my voice never failed, but my feet were trembling the whole time. They never stopped. Usually when I talk to an audience of some kind for teaching or anything else, if I'm nervous in the first few minutes, then I get over it, and then I get into what I'm saying. I was into what I was saying. This was working. My connection with the audience was working, but my feet were shaking like crazy. And I still thought I might fall down.
Oh my goodness.
And so it was a very strange sensation, but it was such a glorious, well-received, I could feel the audience in a way that I had never felt it before. I could feel them soaking in my story, and I made a great revelation during the telling of it that I shared with the audience that they didn't know wasn't originally part of the story.
Wow.
And it just made me so happy to discover this. And so then I went and shook all the way back to my chair and sat there, calming down afterwards.
Wow.
It was kind of a very bizarre kind of a combination of things,
Yeah.
you know. But it was wonderful, and that was only a year and a half ago,
Wow.
and I was won 2 more times that year, and I just found I really loved doing it. I spend hours working on these stories. It's not just a casual, you write it down and it's done, or you tell it and you think of it and get up and tell it.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
I think it and rethink it, partly thinking about some of the principles I learned about what makes a good story in my workshops,
Yeah.
and partly in response to sharing it with other people and getting their feedback, what they'd really like to hear, what they feel if I only have 5 minutes I could bear to cut out. You know, so those are kinds of things I have to ask since it has to fit in 5 minutes.
Yeah.
My famous storytellers I tell you about, you know, they tell stories that are half an hour long, sometimes just 15 minutes. And Moth called me up. Kate Teller called me up from Brooklyn, New York, and asked me if I would take that first story and make it into a main stage event. And I was just,
That's amazing.
you know, the Grinch when his heart swells several times.
Yes.
It just felt really great, and I thought, what a terrific experience. So she coached me at least 6 different sessions. I spent at least 3 to 6 hours in between each of the sessions revising, thinking of new things, dropping out precious parts of it, you know, to come up with what I came up with eventually.
Wow.
And it was a better story than the one I had before. And I thought, you know, I can work something, but that was 12 minutes. That felt like a lot of time to be, and I did it, and I remembered it, and it was great, and it went well. It was well received, and you know, people have stopped me on the street and said they know me
That's awesome.
from having seen me in that.
Wow.
And now when I go to Moth, whether I get chosen or not, it's really lovely because people will say, come up to me and say, you're my favorite storyteller, or have you got a story tonight? So it's all great.
Yeah.
It's all great, but I'll have to let you know that if you want to tell great stories, you're going to have a different gift than me if you don't have to work on it.
Well, like I said before, it's you definitely have a gift, but the hard work has definitely paid off because, you know, I do love your stories, and so do so many others. So, and that's kind of a good lead in. As I've done some of these other interviews, one in particular, Eldon, which we actually talked a little bit about before. At the end of his interview, I asked him if there was one person in this storytelling community who he would say has been, you know, most influential, or who he, you know, most looks up to. He said Miss Jean. He said for sure Miss Jean. And so again, like, I know people, you know, really they love you and they appreciate you and just your, you know, who you are as a person, but they love your stories, and so that's you know, that's an encouragement to you. So, well, as far as this community goes, what is it about the Atlanta storytelling community that's special or meaningful to you, and how has your life been influenced just by being a part of the community as a whole?
I would say, particularly through the Georgia Storytelling Network, which I encourage anyone who is interested in storytelling to join. It only costs $25 a year, and you will get a list as long as your arm, of all the different possibilities of things that are going on where you can practice or go and hear lots of the storytelling that isn't the Moth. We know how to get to the Moth because that's what we're a party to right now.
Sure.
And I have found that just everybody is just so personally friendly. There doesn't seem to be any competition, even though there are winners.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem like a competition. It's just like, who are we going to raise up the highest on the platform tonight?
Yeah.
It's like when I've been in 2 Grand Slams, and it's like, it doesn't bother me a bit that I didn't win against that story. I thought I had a great story, and until I heard that one, I thought I might win. But I'm so glad I heard that story.
Yeah.
I kind of feel like everybody is that way.
Yeah.
I don't see any ringers who have a bad attitude.
Right.
There might occasionally be somebody who shows up and gets their name drawn out of the hat, and they are not integral to the regular community. But
Right.
the regular community is so supportive.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And a lot of us are Zooming with one another and get regular reinforcement and help and coaching from each other.
Yeah. Yeah. And it really is. I mean, that's totally been my experience. Like I told you before, I mean, we haven't been coming very long, but I mean, very early on, I got that sense that, like you said, even though there's judges and it's a competition of sorts, that it is very much we're here to encourage and support and to hear each other's stories, because it's who we are and it's how we get to know each other and it's how we learn to love each other. So I very much feel that community as well.
The other thing that I really love is there is more variety of people of different backgrounds and different races and different persuasions who come to the storytelling and come together at the Moth and at the festival. At the Moth even more than the storytelling festivals. I actually, right before COVID, the year before COVID, I went to the Black Storytelling Festival, and I just felt just as welcome there. I was in the minority there, but I am friends with a lot of those people now.
Yeah.
And people, whether they are black or white, should join Kumba, which is a wonderful storytelling group, which is very active and has a lot of gifted people in it too.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
there's just so many different ways to connect, and I like the diversity. I like the diversity a lot.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, for sure. I think it's, again, it paints the picture of it. It gives us the opportunity to hear from everyone, and that's important, because if we're gonna grow and learn how to love people, we have to learn how to love.
Different people have different history and different background.
Yeah, which is what makes it beautiful. Yeah,
it is.
Well, I know that this community is all the better for having people like you involved and who are so committed and just do such a great job of loving people well. And so I'm thankful to be able to sit down and talk to you. As far as ending our time, I would love to hear, we were talking a little bit beforehand about just, this journey and kind of some of the highlights for you. And one of the things you mentioned was the book. And so I don't know if you want to share a little bit about, I would love to hear just a little bit about that.
Well, you know how sometimes your family doesn't want to take time to listen to your stories. But after my son saw that I was so active in the storytelling community, he said, even if I don't always sit down and listen to your stories, I don't want them to be lost. And so for Christmas, the Christmas before COVID, he gave me a subscription to Storyworth, where they send you an email once a week with a suggested
Like a prompt.
prompt.
Yeah.
And you can use that suggested prompt or write a story about anything that you want to. But you write stories about your life. They start out with what was your mother or your father like and things like that. And then some of the things are more relevant to you and some of them are not. And some of them you think, oh, this isn't something that I've been coached to do, but I really want my son to have this story. So I wrote, on average, a story a week for the whole year when I was not being a massage therapist because COVID didn't make it feel like it was safe to do that.
Yeah.
And I put pictures in it, and at the end, they bound it in a book. This is an illustration for a poem I wrote, and they bound it in a book, and now my son and I and a few other people have copies of this book, and you just have to go to Storyworth to find out how to gift either yourself or someone else. But people that you would like to hear their stories, but you never sit. When I was growing up, everybody sat at the table and listened to grandfather's stories for a long time after dinner. And people don't do that very much anymore.
Yeah.
And so this is a way that he'll be able to take this out, or even my grandchildren will be able to take this out and say, what was it like for Gigi, which is what my grandchildren call me. What was it like for Gigi in those days when she was coming up?
Yeah.
And what was important to her during those days? And since my son has come to hear me at the Mainstage event, if I come over to the house and he has friends over, they all stop and they want me to tell them a story about my life. And I get to do that, which didn't used to happen also.
Oh, that's really sweet.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I love that. I love that idea. I've heard of similar things, but I had not heard of Storyworth. So I love that.
It's the simplest and easiest one that I know of.
Yeah.
That they just do it. If you want multiple copies of the book, you pay extra, but it's only it was at least only $99 for a year.
Yeah.
And a printed copy of the book.
Wow. Yeah. That's wonderful. I love that idea. So, and what a great thing, again, like you said, to have that and to be able to have that forever. So that's beautiful. So, well, Jean, I thank you so much for this. I'm again honored, and I've learned so much about you, which is a beautiful thing. And so now I look forward to seeing you more and hearing more of your stories. But now when I'm sitting in the audience the next time and I hear you, I have all of this wonderful history, and I know a little bit more about you, which I think will just make those stories more special. So, and hopefully others will watch. It'll have the same impact on them. So thank you again. I really appreciate this conversation.
Thank you. I find that every time that something new comes up in my storytelling community, I find out something else about myself.
Absolutely, which is a great gift.
Yeah,
so, yeah,
it is.
That's wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Jean. I really appreciate the time. This has been wonderful. So,
thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.